Kemurikusa is an anime by Tatsuki and Studio Irodori, a pairing that you may be familiar with as being the one that brought us the first season of Kimono Friends, which I still need to get to, but that's besides the point. As I binged my way through the show, it left a particular thought on my mind. What does it mean to look good, anyway? I say this as a particularly picky person when it comes to presentation. Sure, I have watched and even enjoyed shows I'd describe as being subpar visually, but generally speaking, the visuals are the predominant factor behind my dropping such a wide array of shows every season. More directly, it stood out to me because I came to Kemurikusa immediately following my attempt and failure at watching the second episode of Domestic Girlfriend, finding myself utterly unable to get interested in a show as visually bland and boring as that one was. Okay, that one girl, her character design is alright, but that's about it. And at first glance, I can see people thinking similarly of a show like Kemurikusa. It does have a certain cheapness to its visuals. However, while watching, I couldn't help but think to myself, this looks way better than most shows I watch, and that led me to the question, why? So, in my attempt to come to a better understanding of visual excellence, let's trace how Kemurikusa gets it right. To preface this, I do want to acknowledge that I don't think Kemurikusa is visually perfect. There are a few occasions here and there where aspects of its presentation bothered me, but those moments are ultimately far more sparse than I found with many other series, and its peaks more than make up for it in a way few shows do. I also think it's worth noting that, sure, one is far more inclined to find things they like about a show that they are already enjoying, and the soundtrack and characters were definitely a contributing factor to my enjoyment, but I would say the visuals were actually one of the main reasons for my getting hooked and staying engaged, so I don't think that argument quite applies here. Let's talk about aesthetic. A word I use a lot, I know, but what does it mean to call something aesthetic, or for something to be aesthetic? The term definitionally simply means in reference to beauty or the appreciation of such, but in actual discourse conjures to mind something much more. Of course, there's its spaced usage in the vaporwave culture, but more specifically, it is to consider the idea of a particular visual vision. That you can talk about a show's aesthetic usually implies there is a defined and consistent style that merits discussion. Call it unique, if you will. It is something that, to some extent, stands out with its look, has a look, for better or worse. Taking into mind the shows I've seen, in whole or in part, most are just kind of there. Inoffensive is the best word for it. They aim to simply express the events set out by the story or characters, and generally do so to a moderately watchable extent, but there's no sense that it is really calling for your attention. At best, they just throw in some cute character designs and consider that to be more than enough. And I don't necessarily think that it is well suited to every, or even most shows to have that aesthetic quality. But when we're talking about good or great visuals, not just effective ones, sometimes that design sense can be a show's main selling point. Kemurikusa, I think, reflects this quite well. Where it seems most series go for a somehow less interesting visual reflection of reality, Kemurikusa puts it full on into abstraction. There's a heavy emphasis on having just a few highly contrasting colors, which lends itself well to very distinct locations and shots. The characters are each bright and distinct, the threat is as well, whereas the landscape is darker and more ominous, creating an environment that not only is easy to read visually, but is interesting by way of that contrast and how it plays with it. Certainly, it has the advantage of taking place within this post-apocalyptic looking fantasy setting, but even in the case of most shows on either of those ends, it rarely seems much thought is put into crafting a distinctive world that goes beyond just having interesting lore. This strong aesthetic, then, is applied with its equally strong direction. The way a show flows, how it paces things, where it places things. Those are, I'd say, far more important than having one great cut of animation. Perhaps aided by the show being CG, we see the cast from every perspective and angle imaginable, primarily being a dichotomy of extremely distant shots, often facing down on the characters somewhat, conveying the sense of scale to the world they are exploring, and closer, intimate straight-aheads where their interactions and the resulting nuances of their relationships can come across clearly. joy, or more precisely, love and fear, intimacy and apathy, humanity and nature. That dynamic permeates the entire show thematically and is most immediately communicated by its visual presentation. It sets its aims towards expressing something simple, and with that aim does so excellently. You really get the sense of the atmosphere, direction, and themes informing and being informed by the visuals. That symbiosis is key to a good experience. That the character animation itself is simplistic, or even the occasional technical error like clipping is, well, almost entirely inconsequential. Those errors, while detrimental, have little impact on the impeccably presented core expression, and that is why Kemurikusa looks so darn good. I'm not saying every show needs to look like this one, or even utilize the same techniques, though if there were more like it, I definitely wouldn't be complaining. But what I want out of a show is that its expression is effective, clear, and consistent. My values are different depending on the show, because what a work needs changes drastically between them. That's why just as I can say, for instance, Mob Psycho looks fantastic, I can in the same breath mention Kemurikusa. Though there may be some overlap, ultimately what makes them look good isn't the same, because what they need to look good isn't the same. Also, just go watch Kemurikusa. It's pretty great. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, share, engage with my content. If you really want to help support me, you can do so on Patreon at patreon.com/corereviews. Special thank you to my patrons Talon and Roggle. Also, I made an EP, so if you want to listen to that, you can do so. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.